All right, hello everyone. My name is Tatjana Luethi. I'm the executive producer of our upcoming fourth conference called Together. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the stakeholders approach. So, joining the conversation here with me are Runa Bouius, an entrepreneur, conscious leadership consultant, and catalyst, speaker, and author. And Runa is also on the board of advisors and a co producer of the Together conference. Hey, Runa. Thank you for being here
Hi,
today.
good
How are
morning.
you?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad for you to be here with me. It's always very exciting when the two of us talk. And also with us today is Kent Frazier. He is the co founder of the Conscious Capitalism Chapter in Los Angeles. He's the principal at ParadoxEdge and the director of learning and development for Lieberman Research Worldwide. Welcome, Kent. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Tatjana. I'm doing great. Good to hear your voice. And hi, Runa.
Hi, Kent. Nice to be here with you.
Yeah, great to hear your voice as well.
So you both will be speaking at the upcoming conference together, which is going to take place on September 13 and 14 at WeWork in Hollywood. But before we get started with our conversation, I'd like to invite both of you to briefly tell our listeners who you are and tell us a bit about what it is that you do. And perhaps, Runa, let's get started with you, if you wouldn't mind.
Right. Yes, I come from Iceland, where I stumbled onto becoming an entrepreneur in my early 20s. So I might be like some of the people, some of the women who might want to join our conference. And I ran my businesses for 20 years in Iceland. I was a former CEO. Um, but like many, started to feel that there was more to life and more to work than I was experiencing, and that took me on a journey, and actually over the Atlantic to the US, where I have been since 1996. And I got really interested in getting deeper into what we now call conscious business and conscious leadership. And that's been my life since then. And I speak and I write about these issues. I promote this through conferences like we are promoting here and other events, retreats and programs. And I'm just passionate about this new way of living and leading and working together in this 21st century. And happy to do it with people like you, Tatjana, and Kent.
Great. Thank you so much, Runa, for that. Kent, let's move over to you now and please tell us a bit about yourself and what it is that you do professionally.
Sure. Thank you, Tatjana. Good morning. Um, I've spent most of my career, 20 plus years, as a student of human beingness and how we come together in this thing we call work. Where as adults, at least here in the Western world, we spend the majority of our waking hours at this thing we called work. So my work and my career has had quite an interesting background, from having started a couple companies myself to working with 3-4 person startups to working for multi-billion-dollar, both privately held and publicly held companies. And so it's been really interesting just to be a student of how organizations leverage people as a means to make a contribution in the world. And currently I am heading up learning and development with a global market research firm called Lieberman Research Worldwide. I'm also a partner and collaborator in an organization called ParadoxEdge, which is based on Ken Wilber's work of integral theory, looking at how all the different components of existence are really tied together in the extent to which we can really understand all different perspectives of what's happening in any given moment, be it an individual or an organization. How do we make sure that we bring all of these different facets together in an integrated way to move towards wholeness and move towards our highest potential? And lastly, having been a student of business and really wanting to understand how to build fully human organizations, founded the Conscious Capitalism Chapter here in Los Angeles. I've been participating in that movement for the last few years. Had a chance to help the Bay Area chapter get up and running, and as I moved down here recently to work with Lieberman, noticed that there wasn't a chapter here in Los Angeles. So I'm excited to bring these tenets of conscious capitalism here to the Los Angeles area. And it's actually where I met you two lovely ladies. So
Yeah.
excited that we're connected through that entity.
Right.
So
exactly.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for your introduction. So, okay, let's go right into it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to contextualize really quick what we talk about, what we're going to talk about today, and tie it in with what we did last week. So last week, Runa and I had a conversation with Jean Sullivan, principal of Sullivan Coaching Programs, where we explored a topic on purpose, and specifically, what does purpose have to do with business? So Runa gave us a really beautiful context and outline about the 4 pillars of the conscious capitalism movement. So now for anybody that's listening and that is new to this movement and has never heard about these pillars or practices that are formulated by the conscious capitalism movement, these pillars basically represent the blueprint on how to build a conscious or mindful business. And by the way, Runa and Kent, feel free to correct me after I'm done with my context, because I'm not the specialist here. So what we learned last week is that purpose is the first pillar to be examined for any business that understands that we desperately need to redefine how we conduct business and how we do business. Not only because it's no longer viable for our planet, and it's no longer viable for the human health and the human happiness factor, but also to reassess why we are in business to begin with. So through pillar 1, we basically are redefining the purpose of a company that goes beyond its original and sole traditional purpose of only making a profit so as to satisfy the board of investors, and rather examine why does business exist and what does it advocate for and what does it stand for. So having said all of that, today we're going to be looking at pillar number 2, which is the stakeholder. So hopefully I got all of this right, and if not, please let me know. Otherwise, we're going to move on into our next questions around stakeholders. So how was that summary?
That was beautiful.
So
right on.
That was beautiful. Yes, Tatjana, I think maybe I would like to add to what we did last week, and maybe we didn't highlight it as much as I would have liked to, and that is that the purpose or higher purpose of a business is also to bring something valuable to the larger whole, and that actually leads us into the stakeholders approach, that the purpose is not just for the health of that particular organization, but for the bigger whole. We are really starting to be so connected globally in every way that everything that we do through our business can and should affect the bigger picture in a very positive way. So it's really also a vehicle to do good in the world.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you for recapping that. So then let's move on. So I hear you both refer to pillar 2 as the stakeholders approach or stakeholders orientation. So what does that mean? In which context are we talking about that?
Yeah, Runa, do you mind if I take a stab at this and have you provide some color commentary? Yeah. So I love how you talk about how you and Jean and everyone talked about purpose and the interdependency that has with stakeholders. So in a traditional way, folks have thought about business and its reason for existing is to maximize shareholder return. Imagine if you have a business that depends on other businesses and they all depend on one another to be successful. And each of those businesses' sole purpose was to maximize their own financial return. You can right away see that there might be some opposite interests, and we might work more against one another versus towards working with one another if we're only trying to maximize our own financial return. So the stakeholder orientation really how it builds off purpose is, what contribution do we all want to make, as Runa just talked about? What contribution do we all want to make in the world? Why do we exist? And as we go out trying to find people who also deeply care about similar things and want to make similar types of contributions in the world that really serve to promote everyone's well-being, now we have a very different dynamic at play. Now we're co-conspirators, if you will, to do well in the world, and the stakeholder becomes larger than self. The stakeholder becomes the community in which we're serving. So the stakeholder orientation is really about resting in what do we all deeply care about, and how can we work together in harmony so that we are all thriving, but also, and maybe more importantly, the contribution that we're all making in the world to help elevate humanity, to help the greater good, that's bigger than any one of us could have done alone.
Mm-hmm. So if I was to just quickly summarize, it's about the well-being, the harmony, the alignment, creating alignment, finding like-minded stakeholders to work and collaborate with each other, contribute for the greater good that we all keep on talking about. Okay. And you mentioned interdependence, interdependence between purpose and stakeholders, an interdependent ecosystem. So is that what you were referring to, that we're creating this new ecosystem of how we are with each other and of how we collaborate with each other?
Absolutely. Yeah, as we think about the modernization of the world, at one point in time, what happened in North America stayed in North America, what happened in South America stayed in South America, Europe, Australia, etc. But now, as modernization, as societies have become connected through technology, through internet, through travel, through media, various media outlets, we're recognizing very quickly that what used to feel like independent entities is now very easily seen and experienced to be interdependent or connected in some way. And within the conscious capitalism community, we like to think about things with respect to how the natural world works. And there's a pioneering naturalist, John Muir, who many folks have heard of and are aware of, and he has such a beautiful way of talking about this. Or we talk about the stakeholder orientation with one of his words when he said, when you tug at a single thing in nature, you find that it's attached to the rest of the world. And while we've always been attached and while we've always been connected, what we can see now are the connecting threads that are much more visible today than they may have been in the past. So now, as we think about what we're doing every day, who depends on me in order to thrive, and who do I depend on in order to thrive, and how can we create the conditions that allow everyone to thrive?
So it's really raising the awareness about this whole interconnectedness.
It has to do with us staying sustainable, and where we are on the planet today is telling us that we haven't always been so wise in the decisions we have made in terms of how we have, for instance, treated the environment. And what we are really needing to do is to create a future for our future generations and for ourselves while we are here that is sustainable. And when we don't use the wisdom of nature, like Kent so beautifully described, we are, and when we think just short term, we might be successful for a very short while, but we are totally disconnected to the bigger whole. So it's not going to last. The success is not going to last. And everything we are doing now is looking at the sustainability long term through that interconnectedness.
Well, absolutely. And that leads me to the next question. So how does a business owners know who their stakeholders are? So I wonder, I wonder if somebody's building a new, launching a new business, for example, or someone that is switching from, let's call it the traditional mindset, right, into the new mindset of how to do business. How do they go about that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the first thing that came to my mind seems like a joke, but it's actually pretty true. And the first thing I would offer that anyone do is open your eyes and look around. So really, wake up and look around you
Right.
and see who you see and see what you see, and recognize that everything you see is somehow going to be connected to what you're up to in one way, shape, or form.
Right.
So understanding then where the more significant interdependencies are, and really have an open eyes, open heart, and understand, gosh, well, you know, what conditions do I really want to create with and through these other folks that I have to coexist with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's like you said, it's really everyone that's around us. And there may be a different underlying, I'm going to call it agreement with each one, but at the end of the day, regardless what the business is about, it impacts everyone. That's what I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have a really great friend who is in the conscious capitalism movement with us, Norman Wolf, and he has written this beautiful book called The Living Organization. And he talks about the machine organization and the living organization. And if we look at the machine organization, which is how most companies have been up till now,
Right.
it is they look at their employees really as tools to create the results that they want, which is then, you know, increasing their bottom line. But they don't look at the people as living parts of the ecosystem, and therefore, like you have experienced yourself, Tatjana, you were working for a company or companies that really didn't care about the employees. So what we are talking about here in the living organization is that the organization itself sees and looks at all the stakeholders, like Kent is saying, and values them as living parts of the ecosystem, and tries to find ways to give value to all of them, to create win-win-win situations, so that every stakeholder can feel that they are bringing something valuable to the table, and that they are also valued for what they bring, and that they can become a part of something that is bigger than themselves, right. Just like Kent said, because that's where we tap into the fulfillment and meaning of life and living.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So it's this whole feeling of not feeling that you're being objectified for a purpose that, you know, is only for the company, but like you say, really being able to be part of the collaboration, inclusive, feeling honored, respected, and valued for what it is that an employee can contribute. Now, in regards to what do you do when various stakeholders have opposing needs? How do you deal with a conflict or a challenge as such?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And there are many ways that people do that, but I think, as I think about the stakeholder orientation, first, our relationships, I would posit, should be built upon this foundation of trust, and the extent to which stakeholders trust one another. And that kind of ties back to what you all were talking about with Gene, and like, what's our purpose and what's our shared sense of purpose that provides that foundation of trust. As we trust one another and we have some sense that we're up to something together that's bigger than any of us would be able to accomplish alone, those opposing perspectives are actually fuel to really spark and initiate the creative process, or the creative energy, where all innovation comes from, where all newness comes from. And so as we think about capitalism, we think about the power of that to create value in the world in a really generative way. We need creativity, and it's that tension that's created by opposing perspectives or opposing points of view that invokes that creative spirit or that creative energy. And we rest in that tension, and we actively lean into that tension until some newness, some creative spark of brilliance emerges that we maybe never could have thought of before. So I use that tension constructively and generatively as a means to invoke the creative process.
So what I hear you talk about is you're really referring to diversity bringing diversity together and bringing complementary skills to the table so that we can be creative and innovative with those opposing views and needs. That's what I hear. I wonder within that, I probably can also see what needs to be developed are the inner skills or soft skills for each individual as to how to hold themselves or how to hold one's, I don't know, I'm going to call it raw emotions, so that we actually can collaborate with each other. So in one way, yeah, we need the diversity. And on the other hand, it also catapults, I call it an opportunity for development for each individual person.
Yeah, I love how you're making these connections, Tatjana. It's great, and perhaps great foreshadowing of how all this is going to tie together at your upcoming conference, which I hope people come to. It's going to be awesome. This notion of how we hold ourselves in this interdependent stakeholder orientation is incredibly important, and it really gets to being very present and very mindful and understanding yourself.
Right.
At a really deep level, understanding yourself emotionally, understanding yourself interpersonally, understanding yourself, as all stakeholders have this sense of mindfulness, we can look at how we continue to develop ourselves with other people around, it's paramount to the success in the stakeholder orientation to have each individual be really aware of themselves.
Right.
We're actually, if I can just speak briefly, we just launched a 6-month emerging leadership program here at my company, where we get cohorts of 15 people to go through this embodied journey of learning or development together. And the container that we offer for folks is that development is not an accomplishment per se, but it's more of a way of life. And in this sentiment, it's an orientation. That developmental orientation brings its own rewards, and what's really important is the direction of one's motives. So again, tying that back to stakeholders is, what are we all up to here? And in this leadership program, we first start with each participant deeply exploring their own self. What's their sense of purpose? Who do they depend on, and who depends on them? What deeply matters to them? And as they think about themselves as a leader in an organization, as they know themselves, as they know how they show up, as they know what they're up to with other folks, now how does that affect this sense of team? And as teams begin to understand their interdependency with one another, how does that then affect the entire culture of an organization, which I'm sure you'll talk about at some other time within the conscious capitalism, that conscious pillar.
Right.
So we talk about conscious leaders and conscious cultures as part of this as well. So even in our conversation here, we can see how these tenets also tie together.
Yeah.
From purpose to stakeholders to culture and ultimately the leader.
Well, absolutely. And like you keep on saying, I mean, essentially it sounds like it starts all with, we have to know ourselves first before we can, create and scale it up into a larger level. So to really be aware of who we are and what we do and what we stand for and how we actually behave and interact with everybody. Okay. Well, it's almost 8:00. And I know you have a meeting to go to, Ken. So thank you so much for being here. What I'm going to do really quick is I'm just going to close it up. And I want to repeat the date of the conference for our audience that's listening. So the Together conference is taking place on Saturday and Sunday, September 13 and 14, 2014, at WeWork in Hollywood. It's a 2-day conference where women will learn simple yet critical skills to thrive in today's changing marketplace. And the format of the conference is designed to really inspire purpose, to help clarify direction, and instill effective actions through panel conversations, through hands-on workshops, and around how to implement conscious leadership, conscious business structures, new go-to-market strategies, and marketing practices. And so for more details and information, please go to schooltogether.com. That's SK like a king. I also want to take an opportunity to thank our sponsors. So we have Whole Foods in Venice, WeWork in Hollywood, we have Runa Bouius, we have Vidra Media, AIGA Los Angeles, and all of our other supporting and media partners are also listed on the conference website. So this is it for today. And Runa and I will be on later on this week for another conversation to discuss the next pillar. And Kent, Runa, thank you both so much for your time today. We're really looking forward to seeing and hearing more about you at our conference in 4 weeks from now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Runa. Yeah, it was great.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.